in this very busy political season. I know a lot of you are working on campaigns, and thank you for taking time away from whatever children or whatever else you have going on. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Morabito. I'm the president of the Greater Boston Tea Party. There are lots of Tea Party people here. There's also lots of objectivists. Welcome. The objectivists in the room, if you would raise your hands so we know who you are. Okay. Very good. Very good. And for those of you who don't belong to either group, if you're a fan of the free market, you are in the right place. You're among friends here. So we're very excited about our speaker tonight. He has been a friend of the Greater Boston Tea Party since the very beginning. He spoke at some of our early rallies, and we've watched his progress and been very happy to see, how his career is progressing. And I want to introduce right now someone that I have had the pleasure to get to know over the last few years. And without her help, this event would never have happened. So I would like to introduce the fabulous Catherine Van Arnam.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for coming tonight. On behalf of the Greater Boston Tea Party and our intrepid chief, Morabito, welcome to this special presentation by Yaron Brook. He is president of the Ayn Rand Center for Individual Rights. His articles can often be found in major publications such as the Wall Street Journal, USA Today, and he appears regularly on national television, programs such as The O'Reilly Factor and Closing Bell. And he currently co-authors a column at Forbes.com. He was born and raised in Israel and served in the Israeli Military Intelligence Service. After receiving an MBA and PhD in finance from the University of Texas, he became a finance professor, and he's currently managing director, chair of a financial advisory firm. He became an American citizen in 2003, and he's co-authored Neoconservatism, an obituary for an idea, and contributed to Winning the Unwinnable War, America's self-crippled response to Islamic totalitarianism. And just recently, he's co-authored with Don Watkins an immensely important book, which I hope you all have a copy of. They're for sale. The Free Market Revolution, How Ayn Rand's Ideas Can End Big Government. The authors seek a revolution in the way people think about markets. They defend capitalism as the only moral economic system in history. The authors take the objectivist position that capitalism consistently frees the individual to make the most of his own life, so he may pursue his own happiness. Our mission at the Greater Boston Tea Party is to educate and advocate for limited government, free markets, free speech, individual liberty, and personal responsibility, all tenets of the Constitution of the United States of America and the Bill of Rights. We're working to save America. It's a battle of ideas, and our speaker tonight has great ideas. You could say revolutionary. So please welcome a fellow warrior in the fight.
Thank you all. It's a real pleasure to be here tonight. And yes, I think the first talk I did was on the water at the pier on the 4th of July, 2009? Yep. 2009, for the Boston Tea Party. Where we could have actually thrown the tea into the hall. Right there. So I'm here to really talk about this book that we just came out with, and I know we've run out of copies, but I hope that if you like what you hear tonight, you'll go to Amazon and buy a copy. They're available in Kindle and audio and any format you want. And what the book really tries to answer is a really, I think, important question that all of us face. And in a sense, I'd say anybody who believes in free market faces a mystery, a conundrum. We all know that capitalism, freedom, free markets work. I mean, everybody really knows that, don't they? It's kind of obvious. It's right there in front of our face. We've been running an experiment for 200 years. Think about the history of the last 200 years as one big experiment in political economic systems. We tried it all. We tried really close to pure capitalism, all the way to real pure communism. We've tried every single mixture of the two possible. And the evidence is in. We've run it. And we've run it across time in the same country. We've run it across different geographies, so we run it in different cultures. And the results are always consistent. The more economic freedom you provide people, the greater the wealth, the greater the standard of living, the better life is, at least from a material sense. Just per capita GDP is higher in countries that are free than countries that are not. And when they become less free, they become less wealthy or less successful. And you can see this over and over again. You can see it in Europe right now. You can see it in Europe today versus Europe in the past. You can see it in America. If you compare our economic growth and our economic success today versus what it was 100, 120, 130 years ago, it's incomparable. In those days, we were growing at GDP rates that only China comes close to, if you believe any of their numbers. Those numbers in America were real numbers. And at the same time, we absorbed enormous numbers of immigrants, right? Millions and millions of people came into this country, and yet we still grew incredibly. There wasn't unemployment, people found jobs. Because it turns out that capitalism creates more jobs than people. And economic growth like this. Real incomes during the 19th century doubled twice. What are real incomes doing right now? Well, they're not quite as flat as the left would suggest that they are, but they're going up a little bit. What you see in real income, what the left does, it looks as just compensation. But if you add benefits, you see that real incomes are increasing, but at a very low rate. What's economic growth? 1.3%. But what's economic growth in a really good year in America in the 21st century? 3%, 3.5%. Why can't the U.S. economy grow at 6, 7, 8%? There's no economic freedom. And again, you can chart this. You can, the United States used to, just 20 years ago, the United States, or less than 20 years ago, 13 years ago, the United States was number 3 on the World Economic Freedom Index. You know how free we are? Anybody want to guess what we are today?
10.
Number 50?
We were 10 last year. This year, 18. Jumped another 8 points in the last survey. We're dropping like a rock under Bush and under Obama. But the point is that we know the results. How many of you have ever been to Hong Kong? You got to go to Hong Kong once before you're done. It's an amazing place, just stunning, because it's a rock in the middle of nowhere. There's nothing in Hong Kong. There are no natural resources. Before 100 years ago, there was a fishing village there. That's it. And today, the skyscrapers in Hong Kong put to shame New York City. I mean, it's an amazing place with over 7 million people. And people came there from all over Asia. And what's astounding is that Hong Kong has, shouldn't be astounding at all, but what's seemingly astounding is that Hong Kong has no safety net, no Social Security, no Medicare, no Medicaid, no free health care. It's just free. They respect property rights broadly, and they leave you alone. Just like America did in the 19th century. And guess what? People want to come from everywhere. They came there. They led societies that were guaranteed all this stuff, right, and were poor, to a place that didn't guarantee anything and was rich. The capita income in Hong Kong today is equal to the United States. Equal to the United States. On this little rock in the middle of nowhere. So we run an experiment. We know the results. They're unequivocal. Unequivocal. Even Paul Krugman knows this is true. He won't admit it. He's a liar. And we have to call them liars because they are liars. Because this is staring you in the face. This is not controversial. Freedom, free markets work. They always work. And if they, if you want to know about the financial crisis, ask me, why that wasn't caused by free markets and why was all government. Ask me in the Q&A afterwards. I've got videos galore about that on the web. So there's plenty of material I've done on that. Capitalism doesn't produce the kind of financial crisis that we have. Regulations and government controls do. Okay, so here's the mystery. We know this. It's like right there in our face. The evidence is in, the empirical stuff is, the numbers are consistent, and yet, what is the pattern of the United States over the last 100 years? Away from that. Away from that. And that's true right now, today. Okay? I mean, it's not like we have an election between a statist who wants to expand the role of government and a free market guy who wants to shrink government dramatically. We don't. We have a statist who wants to grow government dramatically and a statist who wants to grow government slowly. And I'm all for voting, by the way, for the guy who wants to grow government slowly, but let's be realistic who we got. You know Paul Ryan, the radical? He's a radical, right? He's going to balance the budget in 2040. 2040. Government spending grows every year under Ryan's plan by 3%. 3%. Faster than GDP. Why do they say it's going to cut a lot? Because under Obama's budget, the government grows by 5% every year. So they cut the rate of growth. In Washington, that's called cutting spending, and it's called shoving grandmothers off cliffs, right? Because that's what Ryan's being accused. Ryan is a moderate statist, not a moderate free market guy. But he is. He is. Who out there represents cutting government? Free markets. Free. Emphasis on the F. Free.
Ron Paul.
Ron Paul's not running this time, and he's gone, right? That's it.
Gary Johnson?
Gary Johnson's not going to get elected, so why talk about him? And he's not going to hold any office after the elections, so he's have exactly zero influence. So why talk about him? The fact is that in the political world, nobody is, in spite of this evidence, in spite of the fact that we know that capitalism works, in spite of the fact that all the evidence suggests it works, nobody advocates for it. Nobody's fighting for it. Nobody will vote for it. Let's say we had somebody, Gary Johnson. Gary Johnson's pretty close to full free markets. He would actually cut government spending, really cut, not just. How many votes is he going to get? Nothing. Nothing. Because his ideas are not popular. If Paul Ryan is getting killed over what he did propose, imagine what the treatment he would get is if he actually proposed something radical. People say, Yaron, why don't you run for president? Other than the fact that I was born in Israel and I wouldn't want the job, I would lose by a landslide. America's not ready. But the question is why? Because again, the evidence, the empirical evidence is there. It works. There's something about capitalism. There's something about free markets that makes us resent them. That causes us to instinctually, as a culture, reject them. When there's a financial crisis, when there's economic crisis, always, always, always the first blame is placed with the free markets, with bankers, with Wall Street, with capitalism, with markets. Immediately. Before the evidence is even in. Before anybody's looked at the facts, we immediately know it must be Wall Street. I mean, when this financial crisis hit, maybe you've forgotten, but all the headlines were, capitalism is dead. It's all capitalism's fault. I mean, that's complete nonsense, but that's what everybody thought, and it was almost instinctual. There's something about markets, and about capitalism, and about freedom that we don't like. And we're willing, because of it, to ignore the evidence. We're willing, because of it, like Paul Courtemanch does, to lie. We're willing, because of it, to ignore everything. What is it? So what is it that's so horrible about capitalism? What's capitalism about?
Taking risks.
Yeah, why do people make these kind of things?
Money.
What's that?
Money.
Money, to make a profit, right? I mean, it's not just about money, right? Nobody goes to work just about money. But, you know, Steve Jobs wanted to make something really pretty and beautiful in his own image. This was about Steve Jobs. And it's about money because the profit margin in these, at least the original iPhone, was something like 50, 60%. If you really cared about me, it would be, he would have sold it to me half price. But he doesn't care about me. Steve Jobs doesn't wake up every morning thinking, how do I, maximize Yaron's well-being? He thinks about how do I maximize Steve Jobs' well-being. And when I went to buy an iPhone, right, in 2008, the economy was spiraling out of control, and I went to the mall to buy an iPhone because I wanted to stimulate the economy. That's why you guys go to the mall?
In China.
Why'd you go to the mall? Because you want to make your life better. So what is a marketplace about? The joining of what? Of people's what? Self-interest. It's people pursuing their self-interest. The businessman pursuing their self-interest to sell stuff and to make a living and to make a profit and to succeed. The consumer self-interest in buying stuff and clothing himself, buying nice clothes, iPhones, shoes, bags. See, I have a wife. It's about self-interest. And yet, what are we taught about self-interest? From when we're very little, what are we told? It's wrong. Why is it wrong? What is morality about? What's ethics about? What's the good about? What's noble in life?
Share.
The purpose is not to get the right answer. Not helping. It's about being selfless. It's about taking care of others. It's about, my mother, good Jewish mother, taught me to think of myself last. Think of others first. Be selfless. What's the essence of virtue? Sacrifice. Sacrifice means what? Giving something up and getting what in return? Nothing or less. Right? That's the essence. That's goodness. And what is self-interest?
Selfishness.
Selfishness, which is what? Which is we don't really trust it. Which is kind of bad. It's putting yourself first. And we're taught that selfishness and self-interest mean exploiting other people, taking advantage of other people. And yet the marketplace is a place where people come together to pursue self-interest, to be selfish. Adam Smith knew this in 1776 when he wrote The Wealth of Nations. I always remember when that book was written, right? Great year. But he says in The Wealth of Nations, he says, the baker bakes the bread not to make you happy. He doesn't know you, doesn't care about you. He bakes the bread to take care of himself and to take care of his family. He's trying to make a living. And the grocer who sells you the bread doesn't really care about you. He cares about himself. He has to care about you only because you're a customer. And because you're buying his stuff. And he's trying to make a profit. And he's trying to take care of himself. And if he's taking care of himself, and all these people in the marketplace are taking care of themselves, we know that's what capitalism is about. That's what markets are about. And yet morally, we're told that's wrong. There's something offensive about that. There's something wrong with the profit motive. We hear it all the time. Profit, those oil companies are making too much profit. Drug companies, how can they make profit off of drugs that people need? Profit is a negative word in our society because it's self-interested. Take Bill Gates. He builds Microsoft, he builds this company. In the process, he makes for himself tens of billions of dollars. And while he's doing this, what do we think of Bill Gates?
Evil rich guy?
Evil rich guy, or we think, okay, he's a good businessman, but from a moral perspective, we think, wow, there's a moral guy. There's a good
Go
person.
after him?
No, we didn't. What's that?
Did the Clinton administration go after him, break him up to 10 companies, Microsoft's?
No, they didn't break them up, but they did go after him. We think of him negatively. Or at best, we think of him neutrally from an ethical perspective. Now, when does Bill Gates become a good guy?
When he gives away his money.
When he gives away his money. When he retires, stops making profits, and starts giving it away. That makes him a good guy. So note the culture we live in. Building stuff, creating, changing the world, which is what Bill Gates did. Change the world. That, from ethical perspective, we view as neutral. Giving it away, that's good. And I have this deal where I think I can get it sainthood. Bill Gates. How do you think, what would it take for Bill Gates to become a moral hero? He'd have to give it all away, move into a tent, and if you can show some suffering, show some blood or something, that would really help. Because that is the moral framework in which we live. We believe that suffering, that sacrifice, that pursuing other people's interest above your own, that is nobility, that is goodness, that is virtue, that's morality. Now, where do you think Bill Gates affects more lives? Where does he do more good for humanity?
Building software?
When he makes his money, or when he gives it away? He makes his money. He's affected every human being on the planet with his software. I don't know if we'd have an internet today without his software. And think about all the things that the internet provides and makes possible in terms of medical innovation and information, rising standard of living all over the world because of Microsoft. He's giving his money away. Yes, he's helping some people, but he's helped a lot more people through his profit-seeking activities, and yet he gets no credit for that, and he gets all the credit for his charity. I mean, nothing wrong with charity. But why is there something wrong with profit? Why is there something wrong with business? Why is there something wrong with making a lot of money? Now, who lost when Bill Gates made all that money? When you bought his product, did you lose? You paid $100 for software. Why didn't you lose? You chose to do it. Sometimes we choose to do losing things.
You wanted the software more than the $100.
Yeah, exactly. You wanted the software more than $100. Otherwise, you wouldn't have given up the $100. So to you, the software was worth more than $100. So what do we call those kind of transactions where I gain and you gain? We call them win-win. So win-win is what Bill Gates did at Microsoft. That morally is suspect. Lose-win, which is what sacrifice is, you give, you don't expect anything in return. That's noble. There's something screwy going on here. And it's no surprise that we don't trust capitalism. Because capitalism is about these win-win, it's about self-interest, it's about profit, and yet we don't think it's noble, we don't think it's good, we don't think it's valuable. Not from an ethical perspective. And I'll tell you that people vote, people think, not about their pocketbook. It's not true that people vote their pocketbook. If people voted their pocketbook, we would have a thriving capitalist economy today. People vote what they think is right, what they think is just, what they think is noble. And capitalism isn't just right and noble. Free markets are not right, just, and noble. People won't vote for that. I'll get to you. You've got a question?
Yeah, I mean, when I look at Microsoft, he also used, Bill Gates used the patent system to create a monopoly. And maybe underneath it all, it's not really the free market system.
Well, we can talk about patents, but I don't think patents are a monopoly in a sense of course they're going to be patents in a free market system. You couldn't have a free market system without recognition of property rights over intellectual property. So I don't think that's a constraint in free markets.
Well, I don't believe in the patent system or intellectual property myself.
Okay, well, we disagree on that.
Yeah, that's fine.
So what's the solution? Because there are two things we point out in the book that this causes, this perception of self-interest. One is, because we have a perception that self-interest is bad, we don't trust capitalism, and we don't trust businessmen. And when you don't trust businessmen, what do you want to do to them?
Punish.
Well, you want to punish them, but before you punish them, you have to what? You have to catch them. Because you know they're doing something bad. We all know these businessmen are bad. And you ever walk into, there's an elevator out there. You ever walk into an elevator and you look up and you see the little thing there that says that a bureaucrat has inspected this elevator? And you go, whew, wow. Now I feel safe. Because we know in a free market, elevator manufacturers would make defective elevators and kill their customers because that's how you make money in a free market, right? Why do we need government to send somebody to hire a whole bureaucracy to inspect elevators because we don't trust business. We don't trust the marketplace. I can show you how there are 5, 6 different ways in which there would be private inspections of elevators. You know, there's so many different people that are interested in making sure elevators are safe. But we don't trust them because they're all motivated by what? Profit. And we know profit somehow is bad. It leads to bad actions. So we create regulations because we don't trust the marketplace. The biggest example is, I don't know how many of you were touched by this, was Sarbanes-Oxley, which passed in 2002. And Sarbanes-Oxley is this accounting bill that was passed after Enron and WorldCom and they caught these crooks, right? And it cost the U.S. economy somewhere around $1.5 to $2 trillion of GDP. I mean, that's a huge amount. One of the most expensive pieces of regulation in American history. And yet, what did it do? It was there, it was, the whole regulation was to create rules to look over the shoulders of CEOs and to make sure that every number, everything abided by rules that some bureaucrat had decided are right. And the purpose was to catch crooks. How many crooks does it caught? Zero. Did it prevent financial crisis? No. Anybody know how much it passed the Senate by? What vote? 98 to 0. So not a single conservative voted against this thing. I was on Bill O'Reilly's show in 2002, just after Enron and WorldCom, and Bill O'Reilly wanted to fire every CEO in America. Because he said, they're all crooks, we just happen to catch these guys. And I go, no, these guys are crooks, we caught them, good, put them in jail. But everybody else in America, at least, is innocent until proven guilty. And there's absolutely no reason to think, no, he said, they're all greedy. They're all profit-seeking. So by definition, they're all crooks. Well, of course. Bill O'Reilly is not known for consistency. Bill is flexible. Very much where the wind is blowing. Not exactly the most principled guy when it comes to ideas. So, if you hold this view of self-interest, you can't trust businessmen, you have to regulate them. And there's no end to that. There's no end to regulation. I would argue that this financial crisis was caused by the regulations that came earlier. They created an environment in which this had to happen. So what's the solution to the financial crisis? More regulations. Dodd-Frank. I will guarantee, you can check on this in a few years, that the next financial crisis, and there will be one, sooner rather than later probably, the next financial crisis will be caused by Dodd-Frank. And that the solution to it will be new regulations. Basically heading towards nationalizing the banking system, which is where we almost are today, anyway, because the big banks are almost just entities of the government. It's always more. The last time we deregulated anything, the last time we truly reduced regulation on a significant scale was in the late 1970s and early 1970s under Jimmy Carter and under Ronald Reagan. But that was a very brief period. Everything else has been increased regulation. And I would argue it's because of the perception of businessmen as self-interested and therefore as crooks. Second thing it causes us to do is if your moral responsibility is towards others, if your primary moral responsibility is to be selfless, is to take care of your neighbor, if you are your brother's keeper, if your responsibility is to take care of people who need, people who are in need, people who are suffering, people who don't have as much as you have, then all the government is doing is helping you out. It's helping you be more moral. It's taking your money and giving it to people who need it. How can that be bad? All redistributive programs are based on that premise. Somebody needs health care. I mean, it used to be very poor people. They really don't have enough health care. The quality of health care, nobody was dying in the streets, but the quality of their health care was just not as high as the middle class. We need to improve their health care because they're suffering. How could anybody say no? We believe that it's our moral responsibility to take care of them. We're not doing enough voluntarily, so we're just going to force you to help them. We call that Medicaid, right? And then there are old people with the same issue, so we call that Medicaid. And then there's another group that's not quite here and not quite there, but they really need better health care, so let's add them to the list. And then it grows and grows, and how many dollars of every healthcare, every dollar of healthcare spent in the US economy, how much is spent by government today through one of these programs?
49.
51. 51. We flipped this last year. Right? So more dollars are spent by government on healthcare than we spend as private citizens. Why? Because we keep adding on groups. So then these children, how can you not care about children? And these children are not poor enough to get Medicaid, but they're not wealthy enough supposedly to buy private insurance, so why can't we help them? And then you get a Medicare, Medicaid situation, you get a healthcare situation today where our unfunded liabilities for Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security are somewhere between $65 and $125 trillion. That's the amount of money we promised, minus the amount of money we think we're going to get from taxes. What we can't fund, we don't have any source for, is probably over $100 trillion. You can't tax that. You can't find that money. You're going to have to renege on those promises. There's no way you can ever fund it. But nobody's saying it. Nobody's talking about it. And when Paul Ryan offers a moderate solution, he gets attacked. Because our moral code is so strong, well, we have to help them. We have to take care of people. And if we don't take care of people, then what's it all for? And, you know, we'll print money, we'll tax people to death, we'll do whatever it takes in order to take care of them. And again, to hell with economic growth, to hell with per capita standard of living, to hell with all those things. That's not consistent, but that's just reality. So the entitlement state and the regulatory state, what we have today, are consequences of our moral thinking, of our ethical thinking. They have nothing to do with economics. In real life, in free markets, elevators don't collapse because the inspector didn't look at them. There are plenty of incentives to prevent them. In real life, in spite of the stories you hear about the past, McDonald's will not kill its customers with tainted meat if the FDA doesn't have an inspector go and approve the meat. But it doesn't matter. We don't trust them. So my argument, what I'd like to propose, which is controversial, revolutionary, is that we need to change our moral code. We need to change our approach to ethics. We need to change our approach to morality if we're going to ever change our approach to economics, to politics, to moving this country in the right direction. Just making economic arguments is not going to work. We've tried that. It doesn't work because just economic arguments, people don't vote their pocketbook. What people want to know is that it's right, and we need to make the argument that capitalism is good, capitalism is just, capitalism is fair, capitalism is moral, capitalism is ethical. And I'd argue, as Ayn Rand argued, that morality is not, at the end of the day, about being selfless. It's not about being self-sacrificial. That morality, at the end of the day, is about taking care of self, of taking care of oneself. That morality is about self-interest. That being good means living a good life. It means living a flourishing life. It means choosing values and virtues that make you a happy, successful person. That make you live a full, complete life. That lying, cheating, stealing are not self-interested values. Is Bernie Madoff self-interested? You think so? Did he sit down and think, what's going to make my life the best life that it could be? I'll cheat and steal from my best friends. That'll do it. Bernie Madoff didn't sit and think. Bernie Madoff did what?
Trying to amass the most money he could possibly amass for himself and his family.
From?
His friends and family.
And how did he do? What thinking process do you think he went through to get to the conclusion that would make him a better person?
Sure.
He didn't think. Bernie Madoff, and you talk to these crooks time and time again. They don't think, they emote. He wanted money. He's like a little, 2-year-olds. They don't think. They want that toy. They're going to get that toy. They're going to yell until they get it. But he didn't yell. He just stole. But he acted like a 3-year-old, a 2-year-old. That's all he did. He emoted. Was he happy? Did he achieve? No, not even now, before he was caught. If you ask him now, he says he's happier in jail than he was before he was caught.
Probably because his nightmare is at least over.
Yeah.
That's all.
He was going to come. He knew whether it was by his family, by his friends, by somebody, he couldn't get away with it, and he couldn't get away with it in his own mind. He knew he was a rotten human being. You can't escape yourself. Lying, cheating, stealing are not self-interested. It's not about money. Money's just one little aspect of life. There are lots of other aspects of life. You can be the richest person in the world. You can be a Bernie Madoff and have no friends, nobody to love you, have no relationships with anybody, have nothing in your life. Is that a good life?
No.
No, so he's not self-interested. There's a word for what he is. Self-destructive. He was destroying himself. He was a whim worshiper. He was driven by his emotions. But to call him self-interested, Steve Jobs is self-interested. Steve Jobs is a guy, I think, who did wake up every morning and say, how do I make my life the most fun it could be? How do I make the best life that I can be? And by creating beautiful, amazing products. By managing the best company in the world. But can that kind of attitude and Bernie Madoff be in the same category? No. Steve Jobs is self-interested. Bernie Madoff is not. He's not. And we need to purify that term. Steve Jobs is not going to build elevators that fall down. I mean, he cares about the exact curve of the iPhone. You think he's going to do something that will actually hurt his customers? That's the mentality we want. That's virtue. That's morality. Somebody who cares about his work to the extent that he does. Somebody who's truly self-interested. Capitalism is a system that makes Steve Jobs as possible. It's a system that rewards them, and it says that they're the good guys. Bill Gates is a good guy for making the money. We all benefit from it. He benefited from it. He took care of himself. He lived a good life. And we all are better off for it. That's what makes it good. We need to be able to justify and raise up the Bill Gateses and Steve Jobs of the world for being great businessmen as morally virtuous, as noble, as the essence of goodness. And then if they want to give their money away through charity, fine. But that's not the essence of what's good. When we can look at people and say, yes, being productive, being rational, being honest, having integrity, but creating your own life for yourself, making the most of your own life. If we can look at people and say, that's what morality really is about, that's what nobility and virtue are really about, then capitalism is easy. Capitalism is just a political system that leaves them alone to do it. When we teach our children that the essence of morality is for them to be happy, for them to be successful, for them to achieve real values, not Bernie Madoff type values, but not sacrificial values, real values in this world, that they be happy and successful in this world. If we can really teach that, if we can believe that, then capitalism is easy. Capitalism is just a system that leaves them alone to do that. I'm almost done, and then I'll take questions. And I think it's, to some extent, this attitude towards self, towards self-interest, towards happiness, towards success, is in the American spirit. It's in the American spirit like it's in no other people's spirit. It doesn't exist in Europe. People don't think in those terms in Europe. People still think in terms of happiness, in terms of success, in terms of personal growth and personal responsibility in this country in a way that they don't in other countries. And there's a reason for that. And the reason is this country was founded on these principles. This country does not in its founding documents say, you are your brother's keeper. It does not in the founding principles say, you should maximize social utility. You should redistribute wealth to those who are needy and not trust anybody who's out for a profit. Those are not the principles in this country. This country is founded on the opposite of all that. It is founded on the idea that each one of us owns our own life, is responsible for our own life, but also owns the benefits, the rewards that come from living a good life. I mean, that's what the American Revolution is about. If you think about the American Revolution, think about 1776. What are they fighting about? What's the big battle between us and England, and really us and Europe? Because what they're fighting against is a whole different philosophy, a whole different way of life, which is European. In Europe, who does your life belong to? The king, the state, the landlord, the tribe, the group, the pope, somebody else's. Somebody else's. Your life is not yours. It's somebody else's. They can tell you what to do, when to do it, and how to do it. Your life is nothing. If you go back and you read about the wars that Europeans fought for centuries and centuries and centuries, you know, they would just send masses of people to die and nobody cared. Because they were nothing. It was, you belong to. America is the first country in human history. And in some sense, it's the only country in human history that was founded on the principle that no, your life belongs to you. And why do we have a government?
To secure these rights,
secure.
governments are instituted
Yes.
among men.
To make possible your life. To make sure that nobody takes your life away from you. That nobody interferes with your life. That nobody coerces you to do something you don't want to do. We didn't create a government so we could serve the government. I mean, Kennedy's statement. Remember Kennedy's statement? Do not ask what
What your country can do.
country can do for you, but what you can do for the country. That's evil. It's anti-American. I mean, the founding fathers viewed the country as your servant. It was there to protect you and leave you alone otherwise. To protect you from harm, to protect you from crooks, to protect you from foreigners who wanted to kill you or take your land. To protect you from Bernie Madoff. You can't even do that. That was an easy one. They couldn't even do that. Because they're so busy regulating every aspect of our lives and expecting us to be their servants. We have become government servants instead of them being our servants. This country is founded on the principle that your life belongs to you. Now that is self-interest. We have an inalienable right. What does inalienable mean?
Cannot be separated from you or removed by any way.
Nobody can take it away. Even a majority can't take it away. Even if all of us vote to silence me, you can't do it. I have a right to free speech. That means, a right means, nobody can take it away. Including, by the way, a majority. This is where we're not a democracy, not a majoritarian democracy, right? We're a rights-based government. So we have an inalienable right to what?
Life, liberty, and the pursuit.
Yeah, to whose life? Our lives. We have a right. Nobody can take it away. Nobody can touch our lives. And what does that mean? That doesn't just mean that they can't kill us. It means you have a right to live your life as you choose to live it. Nobody can tell you how to live your life. Nobody can tell you, nobody should be able to tell you, according to our Declaration of Independence, what kind of elevator to build. Other than the marketplace, other than other voluntary decisions that other people, but nobody can force you. Nobody should tell you who to give charity and who not to give charity to. Today we're all forced to give charity. Welfare, Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, it's all charity. So you have a right to your own life and you have a right to liberty. Liberty means to act, to think and act. Your own thoughts, your own actions. Again, however you choose to do them, as long as you don't violate somebody else's rights, which means hurt somebody else. And hurt, we mean hurt, not hurt his feelings. It's not what the founders meant. They meant physically damage. And in the most self-interested political statement in human history, self-interested political statement in human history, you have a right to pursue happiness. Every one of us. They don't tell you how to achieve happiness, what path to take, where to go to find it. No, they just say you have a right to go out there and pursue your happiness. This country is the country of the pursuit of happiness. There's no other country that comes close in that sense. In its founding document. That's the spirit we need in this country. We need a country of individuals pursuing their own happiness and feeling morally righteous about it. And what we need to capture is the moral righteousness. Freedom is good. Freedom is right. Freedom is just. because freedom is how we pursue our happiness. Thank you.
I'm all for your premise, of course. I think everybody in the room is, but the analogy about the elevator, the reason government regulation exists, and granted, once it's established, it can run amok, but sooner or later, somebody is going to build an effective elevator because they're going to skimp on the materials, and if it's a product that's not going to harm too many people that greatly, that's one thing. But a thing like an elevator, that's the reason, because of the occasional bad apple, a greedy person, a self-destructive person, however you want to look at it, there has to be some sort of protection. And then you get into a slippery slope once you start down that.
Of course you do, and the principle is this. Who do you think is better to find the defective elevator? Some government bureaucrat who makes $35,000 a year, who has no incentive built into getting the worst case scenario, I guess he loses his job, but probably doesn't even do that because he's part of a public union. Or a marketplace, an insurance company that's insuring the building, a developer who you are building an elevator for the building in which the development happens, the future clients who are going to use that elevator, who might hire an inspector to inspect the elevator. Can we imagine a free market solution to this? All motivated by the profit motive, not just by my $35,000 job? Of course we can. The problem is we don't let our imaginations go there because we immediately go, somebody's going to slip up. I'm not sure somebody does. How many cases of, electric gadgets, right? You plug into the wall, radios, TVs. How many of those blow up and kill people? Serious question. Because you'd expect them to. It's pretty weird electricity. I'm not an electrical engineer, but it's pretty sophisticated stuff. Right? And it's 110 volt here, I guess. 110 volt. 110 volt, not good for you. Right? 220 in Europe, really not good for you. Why don't they happen? There's, by the way, no government regulation of electrical appliances.
UL lab.
Yeah, there's a private laboratory system that certifies these things. Doesn't happen. So, yeah, they're going to be crooks. No society is immune from crooks. I'm not a utopian. I don't think everybody becomes an angel, right? They're going to be crooks. And crooks should go to jail. And government should catch crooks and put them in jail. But the market works to optimize its win-wins. Trading is a win-win. And the people who cut corners, who cheat, not to the point of killing people, let's say, but just cut, how well do they succeed in business? In a real free market? Not very well. They're the ones who lose. The people who succeed are not the corner cutters. Not in a free market. Not over the long term.
Okay, I wasn't sure which one.
Sorry, next time you.
I think historically speaking, where we get some of the ideas that government needs to be involved is if you go back to the Industrial Revolution, because you're talking about 100 years ago. And if you go back and you look at situations like the Lowell Mills, you look at the Triangle Fire that occurred, you look at the condition in factories, there was an enormous amount of problems. And I think that's what you're seeing, where people have the idea that government needs to step in. So I'm going to challenge you and ask you, how did the marketplace take care of it then? Because it didn't, at least in my historical understanding.
Well, let me challenge your historical understanding first, and then I'll try to explain the flaws that existed, that did exist. We are taught history by the people who have the existing system. We are taught history by people who want to regulate, who want to control, who want to redistribute. We are taught that the robber barons were these evil guys who exploited everybody left and right. That is not the reality. It's not. It's not the reality. Now, were they unsafe working conditions? Yeah, sure they were. We were still figuring out what safety even meant. We were still figuring out what kind of conditions, how you got safety. I mean, think about where were we before the Industrial Revolution?
Farming.
How safe were farms? What was life expectancy of the farm?
30 years?
38. 38. How many kids made it to age 10 on the farm?
1 out of 8.
1 out of 8 sounds radical, but way less than half of all kids born made it to age 10. Way less than half, right? Made it to age 10. That's like before the Industrial Revolution. And then we get the Industrial Revolution, we see kids in factories, and we go, oh my God, kids are working in factories. Yeah, but they're living. Most of them make it well into their 50s now. How did that happen? And what was the alternative? The alternative was back to the farm and die. So yeah, it takes time to figure out what your new standard is, but remember that the standard was, when the Industrial Revolution started, was farming, was death at average age, life expectancy was 38 to 40. By the end of the Industrial Revolution, or by the beginning of the 20th century, it's close to 50. That's a huge increase. Right? And then soon after that, it's 60. So we're learning. Workers in the beginning are so desperate for a job because they don't want to go to the farm, because the farm is so horrible. They're so desperate for a job, they're willing to take on a lot of risk. But then they get used to the work, and now they say, wait a minute, it's unacceptable that you use this machine in this particular way. We've got to make changes. So there's an evolution. If you had put a bureaucracy in charge of the Industrial Revolution to make sure the air was clean and everybody was safe and no children worked, we'd still be in the farms. It would have never happened. This evolves gradually. It takes time. It takes time for the market to find mechanisms to solve these problems. I'm not saying it's instantaneous, but life is not instantaneous. At the end of the day, life is risky. Life is risk. There's no life without risk. And you calibrate how much risk you're willing to take depending on what you're used to. And in the 19th century, people were willing to take on a huge amount of risk. Have you seen those pictures of the building of the skyscrapers in New York with those guys walking on the beams?
Yeah.
I mean, no OSHA inspector would allow that. But you tell them that they can't do it, they would be horrified. They were used to those kind of risks. That was part of their life. It was nothing as compared to the lives they lived before they got an opportunity to make a living, taking those risks. So, yes, sitting in the 21st century today, looking back, or sitting in the 21st century and looking at Indonesia and saying, why are kids working in Indonesia? How horrible is that? And I'm saying, no, it's a wonderful thing. It's a wonderful thing that children are working in Nike so-called sweatshops in Indonesia, because the alternative is those kids dying. Those kids starving in the fields. Because I don't know that you're writing checks to keep them alive. We're not. There's not enough money in the world to keep alive all the children that would need it. And why would we, right? No, so let them have a job. And they'll learn a living, and they'll create enough wealth so that their kids won't have to work in the factories and will go to school. By the time child labor laws passed in the United States, there were almost no children working in factories. For two reasons. Parents don't want their children working. Parents want them to send them to school. But how many schools existed in the beginning of the 19th century? Almost none. There were no schools. There's no public education, but there were no schools at all. What do you need in order to have schools?
Money?
Wealth, money. And was there any money in the beginning of the 19th century? No. People don't teach history. History is complicated. Right? History is about what happened before, not just what happened in the middle. It's what happened before, and what happened in the middle, and what happens in the end. Why did we have schools at the end of the 19th century?
Didn't we?
Why did we have schools at the end of the 19th century? Because we didn't afford them. If you'd raised taxes to have public schools in the early part of the 19th century, you think you could have done it?
No.
Wasn't enough wealth. And kids had to work in a farm or die. Child labor began when the first human being was created, right? Children have always worked. The only period in human history that children haven't worked is the last 120 years. Because of the Industrial Revolution, we have so much wealth, we can spoil our kids. You know, we don't even send teenagers to work anymore. So, in my view, that history is very different than the way it's taught. And you have to view it as evolutionary. And yes, horrible things happen that people learn from and would have done differently, if not for government intervention. But it's a slippery slope, and once you start, there's no end to it. And bureaucrats don't know better than the marketplace does. They don't. She was next, and then I'll start. And we can go on to
Okay, so one of the statements, I think people vote because they want to be safe. It's not like that's what they vote. What's going to make me safe in this moment? And then the question that I have is, I understand that like unions got started in order for people to organize what standards they wanted to work around at the beginning of the 19th century. Is there a place for them today? And can you just comment on what that is?
Sure, there's a place for unions potentially today in certain professions, but not with government protection. See, the problem with unions is not unions. If you could organize as a union, and I as the boss could fire you, then we'd be fine. The problem is that we have all these laws that treat unions differently, that protect them. You can't fire them. You have to negotiate for so many days. You have to do this. You have to. What's the government's business? How I deal with my employees. So I don't think there's anything wrong with unions if they don't get special treatment by the government. And you have to go back to laws in the 1930s and the early 1940s that were passed that protect unions and that make it very difficult for employers to deal with unions and give unions political power for economy, the power of force, which they shouldn't have. If they're completely voluntary, if joining a union is voluntary and dealing with a union is voluntary, fine. I mean, free association is part of one of the principles in our Constitution. I don't think, and then you can get a public unions is a whole different story, I think, because they're playing with our money. I mean, yep.
Yeah, getting back to Bernie Madoff, what's the difference between him and John Corazon?
Nothing.
So why isn't John Corazon going to jail?
Because he's a politician.
What makes him special?
What makes him special is he's well connected. We don't live in a system, what was the sense in which in the Declaration of Independence it says all men are created equal? Does that mean equal outcome?
No.
No, what does it mean?
Equal treatment. Equal rights and equal treatment under the law.
Yeah, equal rights and equal treatment under the law. That's what this country was founded on. We don't have that anymore. If you're a well-connected politician, then you don't get treated equally. And indeed, if you're a businessman, you don't get treated equally, you're going to get treated worse. And if you're a politician, you're going to get treated better. There's no equal protection under the law anymore. We've lost that. Corzine should be in jail. But he was a senator, he was a governor, right? Governor of New Jersey. He was best friends with the guy regulating him.
That's what I'm saying.
I mean, the system we have today is completely and utterly corrupt. We don't have the Constitution anymore. I mean, it's a fictitious document that judges once in a while refer to vaguely, and who have no understanding of the document. None of the judges do. And yet, it doesn't exist for literal purposes of our lives, unfortunately. That's the tragedy of America today, is we live in a democracy where we can vote anything, and democracies turn into what? When you can vote for everything, what do democracies turn into?
So you Russia?
Mobs.
Tyranny.
Mobs. It's pressure group politics, right? Who has the most, who's the loudest? Who bangs on the table the hardest? They get their way. That's what we've evolved into. I mean, what does it mean to say a law today is not constitutional? There is no standard, right? I mean, Judge Roberts proved it.
In getting the general population to look at free markets and capitalism differently, isn't your biggest obstacle the mainstream media, which keeps reminding everybody that these are bad? And how do you overcome that?
No, there's an enemy much worse than the media. Because the media is just a consequence. The media is just the outcome. The much worse are universities, and therefore public schools. Because the universities train the public school teachers, the universities train the media. When the media need experts, they go to the universities and they bring them in. If you want to do one thing good for your country, stop giving money to your alma mater. Starve them. They are the bastion of everything bad in this country. Is it Harvard and Yale and Princeton and the Ivy Leagues more than anybody? The better the school, the worse what they teach. I mean, there's a direct correlate. Brown. I was just at Brown. Did this major Brown on Thursday. It's horrific what they teach in these places. That's the enemy. The media is superficial, the media is thin, the media is just capitalizing off of what our children are being brainwashed into. That's the enemy. The other enemy is public schools. Public schools are the enemy. They're dominated by the public school unions. They're dominated by curriculum that is anti-American, that teaches history, non-history, doesn't teach history, teaches that capitalism is bad. When they teach communism, they never mention the 100, 200 million people communism killed, right? Our kids don't learn history. They don't learn economics. They don't learn any, they barely learn how to read and write. That's the enemy. If you want to fight, if the one most important thing we could be fighting for, more important than any political battle, more important than anything else, is to privatize education, is to fight against public schools. Public schools are the enemy. And the only way you get sanity in the school system is to privatize it. Now, I'm not talking about vouchers, I'm not talking about tax credits, I'm talking about selling them all. Get the government out of our kids' minds. It's none of the government's business what our kids are taught. It's our business. Let's create a real free market in education. Why do entrepreneurs and really, really smart people try and figure out how to make this little phone do something just a little bit better? I mean, who cares? Is this going to make life that much different? Imagine that brain power going into trying to figure out how to make education a better product. Imagine what would happen if you unleashed a profit motive and the innovation and technology into the field of education and got the Steve Jobs of the world to figure out how to build a school that would make more money than the school across the street. How do you do that? By teaching kids better. Because that's what we care about.
But I don't see that happening. I mean, public schools.
How about charter schools?
I mean, charter schools are better, but they're still government run. As long as the government is running the education, it's not going to work. And I'm saying, look, none of what I'm saying right now is going to be easy. None of what I'm saying right now is around the corner. This is a long-term battle. But if you wanted one thing where you would have more leverage than anything else in terms of changing the culture, it's getting rid of public schools. Now, I know that's unpopular. I know it's hard to do. But our entire agenda is unpopular and hard to do. And yeah, at the same time, we fight incrementally for politics. You vote for Romney over Obama because he's marginally better. But you also have to keep the big picture in mind. And if you care about the big picture, you care about the future of this country. Again, my view is nothing more important than education. Yeah.
I'd like to ask a question. I mean, if self-interest is a better moral system than I'll call otherly interest, and I agree with that, then how come from a Darwinian perspective, we aren't as a society slowly moving and choosing in that direction? Because I think we're seeing a shift of moving and choosing into other interested.
Because evolution doesn't work on society. Evolution works on animals in the wild. Evolution doesn't work on us.
Well, I think
we don't kill off bad ideas. So, it's an ideological battle. You have to convince people.
Right.
And the problem is that the other side has 2,000 plus years of moral teaching on their side, which is very ingrained in the culture, much more ingrained in the culture than is any theory of economics. It is emotional. It goes right to the root of what people consider goodness and righteousness and what makes them good. And it's very, very difficult to challenge. But there's another reason. So, being selfless, I mean, who has an interest in convincing all of us to be selfless?
Politicians, people who want to be the beneficiaries of what
So
we
people
do.
who want to control us.
Right.
People who want to control us. Altruism, and altruism doesn't mean being nice to people. Altruism has a particular meaning. It's otherism. Altru in Latin is other. It's otherism. It's placing the well-being of others before your own. It's the focus on other people at your exclusion. Your own exclusion. Who wants you to be altruistic? People who want to control you. Because they get to tell you, look, there's somebody suffering. You have to help them. And by the way, I can help. I can be the middleman. I can get to take your money, take a piece, and give some to them. Or, you don't know what's good for you. You don't know what's in your self-interest. I do. I have this unique knowledge. This is, The philosopher king, Plato's philosopher king. This goes way back, right? Plato's philosopher king. We all are too stupid to know what's good for us. We all are too stupid to actually see reality and know reality. There's only a certain class of people, philosopher kings, who see the light. We're living in a, if you've read Plato, in a cave, all we see are shadows. Only the philosopher king sees the sun and the real stuff in reality. So who gets to guide our lives? The philosopher king. So those philosophies are all about controlling people. So they establish and I'm not saying it's a conspiracy, I'm just saying it's ingrained in them. The politicians, the leaders. Think about a tribe. If you're in a tribe, a hunter-gatherer tribe, going back to evolution, right? Hunter-gatherers. What does the leader, the tribal leader, want you to think? That you don't own your life. He wants you to think that you owe him his life. And now, he's never going to say that, right? The leader's never going to say, Hitler never says, right, you owe your life to me. No, what does Hitler do? He's more sophisticated than that. He says, you owe your life to the Aryan people, to the tribe. Now, who knows what's good for the tribe? Only I do. So you owe your life to me, but I can't say that because you'll see through me. So I create an Aryan people or a tribe or something like this to make it palatable. But that's how they control us. That's how they try to control us. So it's a mechanism to put us down. And it goes back to tribal societies thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago. And it's going to take a lot of work and a lot of thinking and a lot of effort to break away from those tribal chains that we still have. And by the way, the founders did it. The founders did it. That's a great achievement. They did it. What happened? Why did we deteriorate backwards? Anybody know?
Public schools?
Can't.
Well, in a sense. So if you were a wealthy Bostonian, right, and you wanted your kids to get the best education in the world, what did you do in the late 19th century? You sent them to Europe. And if Harvard wanted to become the best university in the world, what did it do? It hired European professors. So the reason we're where we are today is because we brought in, we imported a whole European ideology through our universities. And it's grown and grown and grown, and it's never been combated because while the Founding Fathers were great political theorists, America has never had a philosopher to defend its comprehensively. So when the European philosophies start coming in, nobody objected. And they've taken over. Today, universities, how many professors are left of center? 90+%. Even in business schools, it's 70+%. There's no area in which anybody would consider. And by the way, the center's very left. Right? When people say I'm right of center, that's meaningless to me. Because the center today in America is so left that, I mean, today the Republican Party's platform looks like the Democratic Party's platform 40 years ago. And the Democratic Party's platform on economic issues looks like the socialist platform from 40 years ago. The whole political map is shifted leftward. So center is way over there. Right? My left. Yeah, sorry.
So sometimes it seems like the punishment doesn't quite fit the crime, and that corporate people can rationally make a decision that we're going to make a lot of money and suffer a few lawsuits later on. Certainly, you can make the argument for pharmaceuticals. Certainly, financial services, a lot of their settlements are pretty trivial. So what do you say in regards to that?
Well, I mean, the financial services industry is the most regulated industry in the world. They have too big to fail. Why should they consider failure at all? Of course, they're going to ramp up risk-taking, take as much risk as possible, get the biggest bonuses they can, and walk away when it all fails, because they're never held accountable. Because I think the financial services industry is basically denationalized. I don't think it has to be that way, but that's the way it is. Too big to fail, all the regulations, deposit insurance, all of that is a form of controlling bankers to misbehave. So they do. I don't see where drug companies, are behaving badly. I don't. Now,
Well, they're very regulated.
they're very regulated. They become so regulated today that they almost do no R&D. The risk profile of trying to develop a drug today, given the FDA, given the amount of regulation, they almost don't do it. They become marketing firms.
But the COX-2 inhibitors were 20, 30, 40, 50,000 people died of those, and the settlement was not that large.
I don't remember what the Cox study is.
There were anti-inflammatory pain drugs.
Oh, these are like the...
Salvex, Bextra.
Yeah, so, I mean, there's a classical example of regulation gone nuts. So you develop a drug, you test it, the FDA tests it, it's approved, there's no fraud as far as I know. You sell it in the marketplace.
Well, no, you have a lot of trials.
Yes, and the trials show that it's safe, right? That's why the FDA approved it. So you spend, I can't remember what the numbers are, but the numbers are, I mean, you know, incredible to develop a drug. It's out there in the public, and it turns out that you missed something in the trials, and people are dying. Who's at fault?
The government.
FDA.
No, I mean, why is anybody at fault? Who's at fault? Why should anybody pay anybody? I mean, who's at fault? Who made, I mean, if they did the trials right, if there was no fraud, if they weren't lying to people, then, you know, there's those t-shirts that say shit happens, right? Life is risk. Sometimes people accidentally do things that hurt other people. But when are they liable? When do we want to put them in jail? We want to put them in jail when they do it on purpose. We want to fine them a huge amount of money when they do what? When they're negligent. When they should have known. But if they couldn't have known, if they did all the trials and they crossed all the T's and dotted all the I's and they got all the permissions and still people suffered, it's not clear to me that they should be paying huge amounts of money and the settlement should be out of this world. I mean, we used to have a legal system in America that said that if you couldn't prove gross negligence, or at least negligence, then you couldn't claim anything. Accidents happen. That's life. But it's much worse than this, of course, right? Because what was the arthritic drug that they pulled? Vioxx. So here's the drug called Vioxx, right? That's out there. Tens of millions of people are taking this drug. And some people, at least from what I read, some people, this is the only drug that alleviates their pain. And their pain is excruciating. And this is the one medication of all the medications out there that alleviates their pain. It turns out it increases your chances of heart disease, and I'm making up the numbers granted because I can't remember them exactly. It increases your chance of a heart disease by 10%, let's say. I'm willing to take the risk. Who are you to tell me I can't? You're the FDA, right? Why can't we make those decisions with our doctors? Why isn't the requirement for the drug company just to provide me with accurate information and let me decide what risk I want to take? For some people, I read articles, some people said, the pain is so excruciating I'd rather die. This drug was the only drug that helped me. And you at the FDA decide, no, you can't have this drug? Or how many drugs are there out there which are experimental drugs on cancer? I mean, there was the one on breast cancer, right? Avastin. It turns out it worked on very few women. On most women, it didn't have any effect, or it might have even have a negative effect on some. But on the final stages of breast cancer, where some women were going to die anyway, it actually had a positive impact, just very small numbers. So why not let them try it? Why is it your business if I want to take a risk with my life?
But there has to be some regulation if you're doing trials. I mean, there has to be, otherwise you could have just phase 1 trials and, okay, that was tested 3 people.
So let's imagine the government wasn't involved. Could you imagine a system that evolved that would take care of that problem? So the government's out there. It's just drug companies, doctors, medical associations, pharmaceutical companies, all these entities, and patients. And now we're trying to figure out a system that would protect the patient. Could we figure something out without government?
I think it could be very difficult.
Well, writers' drugs.
I mean, I agree with you. Someone should have a choice. I mean, I believe in euthanasia. I believe people should have a choice. However, I think there is still a role for government to play. Maybe not as much as it does, but there is a role somewhere for government to take.
Why couldn't you have private labs testing, authorizing, approving, and those labs gain reputations, Those labs didn't have the force of government in a sense of saying you can't take this drug, it's illegal. That they would have the ability to tell the AMA or the doctors, look, this drug is not safe. We've tested it, it's not safe. This drug is safe. Or this drug is safe in these circumstances, but not in these. And let doctors and patients and medical...
But that's a very complex situation where if you've got phase 1, 2, 3 trials, and that's a very complex, complicated situation.
I agree with you completely. That's why I would much rather have it in the hands of private people than in the hands of the government. What happens, I think, is we get the FDA, and I think all regulations do this, is because it passes through government entities, it has to be standardized, it has to conform to only certain methodologies. We lose a lot of innovation, we lose a lot of progress, and we get stuck. And what is the incentive of the FDA? What's the incentive of any government bureaucrat? Not to have massive failure. That's his incentive. Is his incentive to save people? The fact is no. His incentive is not to help people. His incentive is not to have failure. Why? Because what happens if there's failure? He loses his job. What happens if people's lives are saved? Nothing. He doesn't get a bonus. The incentive built into the system, and that's why these are slippery slopes. That's why you cannot create an FDA that works well. It always turns into the monster that I think it is today. Because the incentive built in is not to optimize. The incentive built in is to be as safe as possible. And that's what we have today, where you don't get personalized medicine. We're never going to get personalized medicine with an FDA. You're not going to get real information. You're going to get Vioxx increases risk of heart disease, pull the whole drug. Pull it all. And blame the drug company, even though, of course, the FDA approved the trial. Anyway, so I don't think there's a middle road here. I don't think there should be regulations. I don't think the government has a role to play. I think the government is there, as the founders envisioned it, to protect us from crooks and criminals and fraudsters. They should be catching people selling snake oil, right, as medication. They shouldn't be telling us what medication is good for us and what is not. That is what the private markets are brilliant at doing. They're very, very good. They're very, very good. I mean, the amount of literature that comes out on which cell phone is better, which automobile is better. I mean, if there was a real marketplace for drugs, for drug information, and if doctors were willing to take on personal responsibility, not just accepting FDA, but taking on the responsibility of treating their patients with the best drugs available and doing all the research necessary to do that, it's complicated. But that's what markets are. That's what the beauty of markets is. They simplify a complication. Yeah.
I work for a pharmaceutical company, and I would just like to say, it sounds to me like it doesn't sound like you're saying no to all regulations, just regulations when they infringe upon life, liberty, as pursuit of happiness. Is that?
Well, give me an example of regulation that doesn't infringe on the pursuit of life.
Well, the example I was going to go to is prior to 1937, there were no laws in the books as far as, and this came out of the Food, Drug, and Cosmetics Act of 1937. Prior to that time, there was no law. You could put a drug out on the market, know that it was going to kill people, and there was no ability for you as a person that died or had a family member to die from that. So for me, it's hard to say that regulation is no good.
No, so you need laws that protect the lives and property of individuals. You need laws that protect us from people who would violate our rights.
So some regulations.
But I wouldn't call those regulations. There's a difference between regulations and laws. There really is, right? Regulations are not there to protect you from crooks. They're preventive law. They're there to regulate how the pharmaceutical business does its stuff, with the hope that the end result is that you will be better off. Laws say, a law would say something like, you cannot sell product X if it's actually product Y. You can't lie about your product, because that's fraud. That's what it would say. Or it would say, you cannot knowingly sell a product that will hurt somebody else without full disclosure that it will hurt somebody else. That's not a regulation. That is a law. And there's a big difference, because the regulations, once you accept regulations are to regulate. They're to dictate how businesses do their business. They're not to protect you.
And you also jumped to one of my other points that as far as the child labor laws from back
Yep.
in 1900s. And I'm with you. If I'm 10 years old and to help support my family, I want to go to work, I think that should be something I should be able to do.
Yep.
So I just get in, when it comes to safety,
You
I
can't
want those
commit,
laws.
I mean, but you can't have your cake and eat it too. The laws should protect you from fraud. The laws are not going to protect you from risk. They shouldn't protect you from risk. That's your responsibility. That's what, look, personal responsibility should mean something. I don't know anything about airplanes. I don't know anything about drugs, right? I don't know anything about airplanes. But when I go onto an airplane to fly, I'm not relying on, I don't think I should be relying on some government bureaucrat. I'm relying on the fact that the airplane manufacturer builds planes that will fly. And that the pilot doesn't want to kill himself, and that the company doesn't want the pilot to kill himself. I'm relying on everybody else's self-interest. Now, if I'm told that it's a 737, but it's actually a Mongolian-made, then that's fine. But as long as the information provided to me is real, it's my job to assess whether I want to get on the plane or not.
So there are no regulations for how long a pilot can fly?
No, absolutely no.
So a pilot could be could be on the flight deck for 24 hours?
So do you think that would happen? I mean, again, this is where this is where the rubber hits the road.
They have changed it through regulation. They have changed pilots' hours through regulation.
Yes, but the question is, what would the airline companies want? Would they want to kill their customers? Would they want to put their customers at risk?
No.
See, this is a call. I trust the profit motive of the airline company. I trust that when they are putting a pilot on the plane, they do not want that pilot to kill me. And I don't, it's not because of regulations. It's because they want to make money.
So why don't they reduce the hours over the years?
I don't know. I mean, my guess is that if it's legitimate, then the airlines would have done exactly the same thing. That as new information is learned about people's ability to concentrate, to stay awake, and so on, the airlines would have done the same thing. Regulations often, safety regulations often follow the patterns that are happening in an industry anyway. But I'm much more trusting of the profit motive of the people involved in the business than I am of government trying to control these kind of things. I don't think the government cares.
But profit motives, at times, you have bean counters who can weigh, okay, well, 7 people are going to die from this. It's going to cost us $7 million in lawsuits.
But that's what they do every day.
But is that good?
Yes, absolutely. So how many of you, let me think about this. What's a good example? I drive a really, really nice Audi. I could probably get into a crash driving 70 miles an hour and walk away. My son drives a 2002 Honda Accord, right? If he has the same accident, he's not going to walk away. We make those decisions about how much risk we're willing to take every single day.
But we're making that decision for ourselves, like that Mongolian plane that you don't know is Mongolian.
Well, that's fraud if I don't know if it's Mongolian. Okay. But you know when you buy a cheap car that it is less safe than an expensive car. And you know, if I would really care about safety, I'd buy a Humvee. I would, right? Because anything that goes into the Humvee will be destroyed before the Humvee is. But that's the reality. We make risk-reward trade-offs every single day, and we should. Because if you try to live a life with no risk, you're dead. It's the most boring, pathetic life possible. So the question is, who should make the risk-reward choices? Should we, or should some bureaucrat? And I'm saying we should. And often we don't have enough information. So we have specialists who do. Right? Doctors, consumer reports, right? Magazines, rating agencies, good ones, free market ones. That's what the market provides. So I'm thirsty for information. Guess what? People will supply it to me because there's money to be made in supplying it to me. That's what I'm saying. Now, I thought you were going in a different way. The people who think short-term, they're the Bernie Madoffs. And they are gonna build the defective elevator. It goes back to that. Yes, they will. And people might get hurt. They do today, and people do get hurt. And that's what we have a legal system for. That's why you go, you sue them, you bankrupt them, you drive them out of business, you do what's necessary. And the court system works very, very well at doing that. It's retribution. Because people will cut corners. I think less people would cut corners in a free market than do today. The more regulations you impose on people, the less diligent they are, the less careful they are, the less proud of their product they are, and the less effective, the less safe it is. I think if you leave it to them, they'll make better products. There will be exceptions, and those will have to be taken care of, and that's what you have a legal system for. You had your hand up.
Me?
Yes.
I did a while ago, but.
I forgot. You've already asked, yeah.
Me?
One of the two of you.
How about the EPA? Let's say I wanted to build a car that actually could get zero emissions, but say I want to modify my old car, and I could get a gas mileage out of it, but I'll be violating so many laws to do that to make a more efficient car.
Yeah.
And EPA would fine me so many
Well, I
money.
said I don't believe in any regulations, so I mean all
Yeah,
the alphabet
I
agencies
back
should
that.
go.
It's like one of those things. There's so many people out there who actually can design a car, but they get fined by the government.
You know, I don't know anything about cars, but I believe you. I mean, one of the things that for example, one of the amazing things is that we basically today drive the same cars we did 50 years ago. There's no big difference between the cars we drive today and the cars we drove 50 years ago. Same, by the way, of airplanes, which is a little scary, right? The airplanes, they're about the same as they were when those first Boeing 707s, I think they were, came into commission. It's the same airplane. It's just got fancier stuff, and now they have Wi-Fi inside. The airplane is the same. Now, with airplanes, we innovated. We took another step of innovation. It was called the Concorde. And where's that? It's gone. There's no innovation in the world around us. And we don't care anymore because we're used to this slow pace. The only place there's innovation is in phones, some computer stuff. But this is Facebook. That's the innovation. Or degradation. We're not innovating, and we're not innovating because we're not free. Innovation requires freedom. We're not innovating in education. We're not innovating in airplanes. We're not in any business that has regulations. You don't get innovation. And that's true of the automobiles industry. The automobile industry is crippled by regulation. Why did Detroit go bankrupt? Went bankrupt because of fuel regulations. Because you couldn't build the right, so fuel regulations require you on average on your fleet to have a certain percentage gas per mileage, right?
Cafe fuel economy standards.
Yeah, right. So, but it turns out that because of labor costs and technology and so on, American manufacturers are very good at building what? Big cars, SUVs. Their profit margin in SUVs is very high, but they're very bad at building little cars. So what would happen in a market? In a free market? They build only SUVs, and they'd let the Japanese and the Koreans build the little cars, right? There'd be a splinter. But they can't, because if they only build SUVs, then they're in violation of the law. They have to build small cars in order to get the average to the right number. But nobody wants these small little cars. They have to sell them real cheap, which means they lose money on them, which means they drive them into bankruptcy. But if we let them just build whatever car works for you, then they build the cars that they would make money off of, and they'd be profitable. And the Japanese would specialize in little cars, and the Koreans would specialize in something else. But we destroy that because we require them to have these averages. So everywhere you look where there's failure, you'll find these regulations, and they're often in ways that you can't, they're not obvious.
I remembered what it was.
Okay, good.
We put all this stock in regulations thinking that they're going to keep us safer and all, but what would stop the pharmaceutical companies from paying off these people in the FDA to get their drug through?
Nothing.
So what is
I
the
mean,
big deal
I don't
with it?
think it happens much in FDA, but I suspect it happens with elevator inspectors. I mean, I worked in construction. I was a civil engineer in a previous life. So I think it happens all the time, and it's much more likely that you can pay off a bureaucrat than you can pay off somebody who's working at a private company.
And all of these regulations get passed on to the consumer, and we're paying for all of these.
Oh, no question, but this is why we don't have innovation, we don't have real progress, we don't have economic growth, is because businesses, profit-seeking businesses, are burdened by regulations that inhibit their ability to create the products that we want and that we would be willing to pay for. It's not a difficult story. I mean, you could get the US economy going at a significant economic rate. All you did was dramatically cut regulations on business. Do away with Sarbanes-Oxley, Dodd-Frank, Obamacare, and 5 other things, just anyone's, right? And the economy would start growing dramatically. And at the same time, by the way, I'd get rid of all government subsidies to business. All the subsidies still to markets, right? And that should be the Republican platform. If they ran on this, they would win. They would win in a landslide. First thing we pass in Congress, the first thing we will do is cut every subsidy to business that exists. All of them, even to our friends, right? Farm subsidies, alternative energy subsidies, existing energy, all the subsidies are gone. That's about $500 billion off the budget. So if you're going to cut defense and entitlements, that's not going to win you friends. But go after business, that's good. You know, and it's good for business. It's good for business not to get subsidies. It's good for business to have to compete, really compete. So that should be the platform. Cut all subsidies to business. And they would win, but of course they don't do it. Why don't they do it? Because they need those campaign contributions from those businesses who get their subsidies. It's a game, right? I'll subsidize you, and when an election comes, you write nice checks to me. And that way, I can't stop subsidizing you because I want to keep getting those checks. And Republicans are as guilty of this as Democrats are. And that's why you really need to get new people in there who have a completely different attitude about these things. Yeah. No, the guy behind you, sorry. He's been waiting patiently.
Thank you for coming and thank you for writing this book. I have a quick comment and then a quick question. One, I know secondhand knowledge that you're right about the regulations, in particular for the FDA. If you take a radioactive medicine for a cancer or something, you have to model how it goes through the body so that you know how much goes to the cancer, how much goes to the rest of your body that's healthy. And the regulation for doing this, the model that they use, is not something that looks anything like a human being. It's a round egg. And this is the standard. And so no drug company, the company that was making this just basically said, okay, fine, we'll do this, but it was just a waste of time. They wanted to know exactly where the drug was going, how long it was going to be there, so that they knew what it was actually doing. They would never rely on just doing the regulation. And so that's a side note. My question is that you say that we need a moral revolution. We need a, what thing can I do first thing tomorrow morning or Sunday or whatever? What can I do in the short term to help get there?
I mean, the most important thing you can do to get there is live a life, your own life, that is consistent with this kind of morality. That is, project to the world a sense of life is good and fun and I'm enjoying it and I'm living it for myself. That to me is the most important. Don't apologize for your successes. Don't apologize for living life to its fullest and embracing life. That to me is the most important thing. And then I think we need to fight the common perception that people have there about business and about greed and about self-interest. And just speaking out, just when somebody says, well, those greedy drug companies, all they do, no, those greedy drug companies are what keeps millions of people alive. And what's holding them back is da-da-da-da. So stand up for the specifics, right? For the things that actually reflect. I believe in the profit motive. I think the profit motive is good. If somebody complains, oh, geez, those greedy people at Apple, they're making so much money off of my iPhone, then don't buy one. Yeah, so It's about taking the idea and then applying it to all the different topics that come out, but dealing with it qua ethics and qua having pride in your own life and in people's achievements, not capitulating to this person needs it. And the answer to that is, okay, but why is that my problem? I mean, it really is that stance. Somebody needs something is not a claim on your life. Your life does not belong to whoever needs something from you. You might want to help, you might not want to help. But it can't be your obligation from the moment you're born because you have stuff that somebody else gets it because they need it. You have to stand up for what's yours. And I think just having that, I mean, I'd like to ask, you know, can you imagine, you know, George Washington filling his taxes? I mean, those long, bulky forms and binders. And telling the government all about his life and what he's deducting and what I mean, can you imagine Thomas Jefferson walking through security at an airport? I mean, they treat us like sheep. They treat us like nothing, like our life doesn't matter. And we just roll with it. We just accept it. So my number one thing is we gotta get a backbone. We got to get some self-esteem. We got to call them on it. We got to say this is garbage. This is nonsense. Stop it.
Do you have time to give us your take on the Federal Reserve?
Sure, my take on the Federal Reserve is very short and sweet. Look, the Federal Reserve is just an example of a government monopoly. It's a monopoly over money. There's nothing the Federal Reserve does that the free market couldn't do. It's just like the post office. And it's run about as effectively as the post office. The difference is that if the post office screws up, then people might lose their mail. Not big a deal. When the Fed screws up, we all suffer. We all go down. And the Fed screws up all the time. It has to. And this is my quick analysis of what. We all know that price controls, anybody who studied economics knows that price controls don't work. I mean, even, again, Courtemanch knows price controls. I mean, you remember Nixon tried them? You remember he froze all prices? I mean, it doesn't work. What happens when you set prices, when a bureaucrat set prices? This is Economics 101 that's been known for a very long time. How do prices get established in the marketplace? Supply and demand, right? And where does supply and demand come from? From millions of choices that we all make. When a bureaucrat tries to set a price, where does that price come from? His head. Not the millions of choices. He doesn't know what people would choose. So he can't predict what supply and demand would be. So any price the bureaucrat will set will be wrong. I mean, he might get lucky and set it right, but it would be wrong. It won't be the point where supply and demand matches. So he might set it too high. If he sets, let's say, the price of bread too high, what happens? No, what happens? Something happens. Everybody wants to bake bread. Nobody wants to buy it. Supply and demand don't match. You get what? You get surplus of bread. And you have to trash it all, you have to throw it all away. That's the reality. If he sets it too low, what happens? Nobody wants to make bread. Everybody wants to buy it. What happens? Shortages, lines. Now, if you're a bureaucrat, where are you more likely to set a price? Too low or too high?
Too low.
No, too low. Because you want people to think you're nice. So you want to lower prices, right? Wherever their prices controls in the world, China, Iran, they're always set too low. And there are always shortages. Soviet Union, always shortages. And the shortage is not because the market failed. The shortages is just you set it too low so nobody wants to produce it because there's not enough profit. Everybody wants to buy it because it's so cheap. So you run out very quickly. Right? What is the price the Federal Reserve sets?
Interest rates.
Interest rates. How does it decide what the interest rate should be? How does it decide? What is an interest rate in the free market? What was the supply and demand? Whose supply and demand would we? Like bread is the people who want to eat bread and the people who make bread. What would be the supply and demand for interest rate?
Borrowers and lenders.
Borrowers and lenders. So What price do I want to lend my money? And to what price does somebody else want to borrow money? And the supply and demand, just like any other product in the economy, would match at a certain price, which is the interest rate. That's all interest rate is, the price. Now the Federal Reserve comes in, and it says, no, we're going to determine this price. We're going to control this price. And guess what happens? It gets it wrong. It gets it wrong. And when it gets too low, what happens? Nobody wants to lend, but everybody wants to borrow. Now, this is a trick. The Federal Reserve has one on top of that. It can produce its own money. So it's not dependent on the people who want to lend. Because it prints money. It forces them, in a sense, to lend. So then what happens? What happens if you lower interest rates to 0? Everybody wants to borrow. I want to borrow money at 0. Who doesn't want to borrow money at 0? It would be ridiculous not to borrow money at 0. Because then I could put it in something, get a return, pay off, and I make a profit. So what happens when interest rates are very, very low? Everybody borrows. You remember what interest rates were in 2002? What's that? 2002. They were 1%. You know what inflation was in 2002? 3%. When you set interest rates below the rate of inflation, you're basically setting interest rates at a negative real rate. Guess what people do when you're basically paying them to borrow money? That's what a negative real rate means. They borrow money. We all borrowed money. We got mortgages. We took out car loans. We maxed out our credit cards. We all borrowed. You see per capita debt ratios in America, they went like this. Of course they did. Because they priced it low. Demand was infinite, and you keep supplying the money, so everybody borrowed money. The key to the financial crisis, the reason the financial crisis happened, is the low interest rates in 2002 and 2003. Why did they all go into housing? Because of American housing policy. Because of Freddie and Fannie and the Federal Home Loan Bank and the interest deductibility of your mortgage payments and all of that, which funneled the money into housing. So housing went up. But the key was the Federal Reserve. So the Federal Reserve always messes up. And then they tried to fix it in 2007, right? And they started raising interest rates to suck the money back in. And what happened? They raised them too high. And suddenly we couldn't afford our variable rate mortgages that we took in the good times. And we started defaulting. And that was the trigger that triggered the financial crisis. But it's the Federal Reserve. And right now we're interest rate. 0. A low 1%. What is inflation? 2 to 3%. Something bad is going to happen financially. A financial crisis is in our future because of what the Fed is doing right now. We just don't know where and when it's going to happen. The Federal Reserve does not exist. These things should be controlled by the market. There's absolutely no. The only reason the Federal Reserve exists. This is the paradox, but this is where it comes to ethics. What happened before there was a Federal Reserve?
The markets?
The markets determined this. There was a gold standard. I mean, the government intervened, but nowhere near like they do with the Federal Reserve. But like, who had a lot of power? J.P. Morgan. Bankers did, right? So bankers, individual bankers, particularly J.P. Morgan, had a lot of power. So, and he was brought in 1907. There was a huge financial crisis, and J.P. Morgan got basically all the bankers into a room, and they negotiated a deal. He saved the country, literally saved the country from disaster in 1907. So how do we reward him? We reward him by dragging him in front of Congress and beating him up as an evil capitalist who was, you know, exploiting his customers and who had too much economic power. And that was in 1913. There were famous hearings in front of Congress, and he was called names and so on. And so we decided that we didn't like the fact that J.P. Morgan had so much power, so we were going to create a Federal Reserve to take power away from J.P. Morgan. Now, why didn't we trust J.P. Morgan's power? Because it was to serve whose interest? J.P. Morgan. And we don't trust self-interest. We don't trust the profit market. So instead, we created a bank 10 times more powerful than J.P. Morgan. 10 times more powerful than any bank in the world. We call it the Federal Reserve. We put Alan Greenspan at the top, and we trust him. Now, why do we trust him? We do trust him. We trust him much more than J.P. Morgan.
Well, Obama says he eliminated the middleman.
Well, we'll get the middleman in a second. But why do we trust Bernanke and Greenspan and we don't trust J.P. Morgan? Because they're in it for the public good. They don't get a bonus. They're not driven by the profit motive. They're not self-interested. because they have no accountability, and they screw up, and they destroy the economy. J.P. Morgan could not have destroyed the economy. The Federal Reserve can. We had inflation in the 70s. Some of us were alive back then, right? It was awful. The 70s were a bad time. Who caused the inflation of the 70s? The Federal Reserve. You can't have inflation without a Federal Reserve. Who caused the Great Depression? We know today who caused the Great Depression. This is not controversial. The Fed did. So there shouldn't be a Federal Reserve. That was my short answer. Middleman. Obama's a genius, right? He came into office, and it turns out that, the government was subsidizing banks to make student loans. So he said, wait a minute, this is inefficient. I agree with him. It's inefficient. Let's cut out the banks, and the government will make student loans directly. And that's what he did. And student loans have gone through the roof and everything. But of course, what's the real problem? That the government is subsidizing anything. The government shouldn't be subsidizing student loans. Why do you think tuition is going through the roof?
So much money.
Because the government is buying it. Whenever the government subsidizes stuff, what happens to price? It goes up. Why are healthcare costs going through the roof? Because the government buys 51% of all healthcare. Why are veterinary care prices going down? Animals are getting better treatment today than ever in human history, or animal history. I mean, we spoil our pets, we give them CAT scans, we do massive open heart operations on them, and the cost of all that is going down. Why? Because there's no government subsidy.
But I checked, the vet won't treat me.
But you know what will? LASIK, the price of LASIK is going down because it's not regulated. And LASIK technology, new technologies in LASIK cause the price to do what? Go down or up?
Down.
Down. New technology in medicine doesn't cause the price to go up. It's how we pay for the medicines, how we pay for the technology that causes the price to go up. So student loans are going up because government is subsidizing. Government shouldn't be subsidizing student loans. Banks should be giving out student loans. There should be a bank problem. People should get realistic about college. They should send their kids to colleges they can afford, not to colleges that their kids are going to have to be mortgaged their life for in the future. There's nothing wrong with some of the good, cheaper universities. It's ridiculous what's going on. And of course, what are the universities doing with extra money?
Adding to their endowments.
They're adding to their endowments. What else? The number of faculty has not increased that much.
They're paying them more.
They pay a lot more, but that doesn't explain all of it. What is growing a lot?
The administration.
The administration. The administration is exploding on American universities. You got at Brown University the other day, I did a debate, and they had to talk to one office for the room, another office, for parking, another office to get tables. They couldn't get us tables. People had to bring tables from home because the university needed 2 weeks' notice if they wanted to get tables in a room that had already been approved. We multiplied the bureaucracy. If you look at the administrators, it's something like we have 3 times more administrators today than 20 years ago at universities, with the same faculty and the same number of students. Because they're making huge amounts of money, so they spend it. They hire people. And why are they making so much money? Because the demand isn't shrinking because the demand is being subsidized by government. Once you start regulating, subsidizing, distorting markets, it is truly a slippery slope. And how can you stop doing government loans now to students? No, because nobody could afford any university because the prices are so high. And the adjustment period would be painful. And nobody wants pain. No politician wants pain. Politicians want instant gratification because we as an electorate want instant gratification. So you can't fix it now. It's dead.
And so do you go all the way to the point of Greece before you...
No, because the problem is, what does history tell us happens after economic collapse? Chaos. Chaos, which is followed by tyranny. It's never the case. There's no example in history that economic collapse, people go, oh, we should have advocated for capitalism. Let's fix it. It doesn't happen. They look, who's the strong man who's going to help them out and save them? So no, this is why you got to vote for Romney. Not because he's going to save us, but because he's going to slow it down. Right now, the acceleration of statism is such that we could collapse. I mean, just to give you some numbers, we have $100 trillion of unfunded liabilities. By it's between 60 to 120, I think it's closer to 120, but we have, by 2025, every single dollar of government revenue from all tax sources covers Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and interest payments on the debt. There's not a dollar left over for defense, for any other function of government. Those four consume every dollar of revenue. And it won't be 2025, it's going to happen a lot sooner because their assumptions are ridiculous. They assume economic growth and they assume all kinds of things. We are heading towards economic catastrophe in this country. Catastrophe, not just a financial crisis. So tell me to stop whenever you
No,
want.
it's actually more of a comment, and I guess this is specific to the cost of medicine. Wouldn't you say there's also a possibility that more than just the fact that regulation is there, but the culture that's demanding regulation, and specifically lack of self-responsibility? I mean, a lot of medical costs are due to preventable things that if someone was owning their own life, really taking responsibility, those things.
Yeah, so people living unhealthy lifestyles and therefore driving up the cost of their own healthcare. I think that's absolutely right, and they don't bear the cost. They live the unhealthy lifestyles, and then somebody else is bearing the cost of treating those unhealthy lifestyles. That is definitely the case, but it's also true that I don't know what the right cost of healthcare is. So people say, oh, we spend 19% of GDP on healthcare. Is that high? Is that low? If I could live to be 150, would I want to spend 22% of GDP? Yeah. So if it was a good 150. There's no right price. The only right place you find out what the right price is in a marketplace, where people's real, willingness to spend money on healthcare is matched with the supply of healthcare. And you match them up and you see how much, and some people might spend a lot on healthcare, other people might spend a little on healthcare. And some people might say, to hell, I'm gonna have a lousy lifestyle, but then I'm gonna pay for my healthcare later on. And some people say, I'm gonna have a great lifestyle and minimize my healthcare costs. People make all kinds of choices. That's the beauty of a marketplace. In a regulated industry, regulated world, we all have to fit into a box. We all have to fit into somebody else's vision of what is right and what is wrong.
As far as financial crisis of the mortgage market collapse, and it was interesting how I've been following that. I've tried to understand how it happened, and your take is very interesting. It's very methodically laid out, very well analyzed. I'm looking for what the next will look like. And I can't find...
Nobody knows. Nobody knows.
You can analyze
you don't know where the bubble is going to be until you're in the middle of the bubble and it's too late. And then you don't know when it's going to burst. I mean, I thought housing was overpriced this is the problem. I thought it was overpriced in 2000 when my wife and I sold our first home and bought another home, and it was ridiculous because we doubled our value of the house, and I told my wife, this is ridiculous. Housing is too expensive. It's going to collapse. And she laughed at me and said, you always say that. And, and she was right? Because by 2004, the new house that we bought doubled in price again. And we sold it and moved into a much bigger house, right? And I said, this is insane. and then from 2004, when we bought the house, it went up another 40%. And I said, we should sell and rent. We'll make a fortune. And she said, this is what you always say. And of course, it happened that I was right in 06, but of course I was wrong in 04. I mean, you can't predict these things, and you can't tell what's going to happen. All I can tell you today is that something bad is coming, because I know economics. And when you hold the rate of interest at 0 for 3 years, and he's not going to change it for another 2 years, and you print money like there's no tomorrow, which he's doing, like QE3 is not even QE3, it's Q ad infinitum because he's put no limit on it. So he's willing to print money as forever, right? They have to be bad consequences. Now, is it going to be hyperinflation? That is possible. Imagine Romney gets elected. Here's a hyperinflation scenario. Romney gets elected, he cuts regulations, he cuts corporate taxes, we all feel great about the economy, we all go borrow money, businesses start borrowing, investing, the banks start taking all the reserves they have and lending money out, that $2-3 trillion the Fed just printed starts circulating, the velocity of money goes up, and you got hyperinflation. The good thing that Romney did, the reducing regulation, will be interpreted as causing the hyperinflation, but no, it was the Fed that caused the hyperinflation. Romney will get blamed for it. But then imagine that the Fed sees the hyperinflation coming and raises interest rates and sucks all the money back in, but overdoes it, which I'm sure they'll do, and drives the economy back into a deflationary cycle, and we have a depression. Either one of those scenarios could happen. And that's just one possibility given the outcome of the election. There are 100 other possibilities. All you can say is that when you cause an effect, right, when you do something that's really, really dumb, bad stuff will happen. Exactly what that stuff is hard to tell. I mean, government bonds. Now again, I've been saying this for 5 years. Don't buy government bonds. Now for the last 5 years, it's been the best investment you could make.
And you've been wrong.
I've been wrong. I've been wrong for the last 5 years, full disclosure. But the fact is that interest rates don't make any sense. They don't make any sense. If you buy those bonds, when interest rates go up, I don't know when, but they're going to go up, you will lose a lot of money. So it's things like that, but you can't predict when. But the best book on the financial crisis, if you're interested in the financial crisis, it's out right now. It's
Future?
Financial Crisis
No.
and the Free Market Cure.
Yeah, The Financial Crisis and the Free Market Cure by John Allison. John Allison just became the CEO of Cato. It's on Amazon. You can get it on Kindle and hard copy. But The Financial Crisis and the Free Market Cure. There's a copy right over there. And it's by John Allison, A-L-L-I-O-S. And it's the best book by far that explains what happened and warns about what will happen.
Just one more question, maybe?
Okay, in the back.
Okay, this is a real narrow kind of tax policy question. First, what's your take on refundable tax credits? And secondly, I've also heard some free markets, fairly decent free market economists favor the idea of taxing the lobbying. Those two ideas, any reactions on those?
No, I mean, I guess I would get, now, what are refundable tax credits? This is a negative income tax?
Yeah, that's an example. Yeah.
I'm against both of them. I mean, the negative income tax is, again, a form of redistribution of wealth. Milton Friedman believed that if you did it, you could simplify and lower the tax code dramatically. It was proven wrong. They adopted his idea and were still screwed. I mean, nothing good happened. So I'm against them. It's just a way of redistributing wealth. My view is that everybody should pay taxes. Every single American should pay taxes if they're going to be taxes. And they should be as low and as flat as possible. And the best tax, if you had to have a tax, and if you could get rid of the income tax and guarantee that it would never come back, would be a consumption tax. Because a consumption tax everybody pays, and you pay based on how much you consume. And you never want to tax production, because production is making stuff, which is good. Not that consumption is bad, but consumption is destroying stuff. Right? Consumption is destruction. Housing, yeah, I mean, housing is not an investment. Housing is a consumable. You use the house. But the best example is ice cream. You produce the ice cream, and consuming the ice cream makes it go away. You've destroyed the ice cream. Now, it's good that you've destroyed the ice cream. The only reason to use it is to destroy it. But consumption is getting rid of stuff, and production is creating stuff. You want to encourage creating stuff. So I would advocate for a flat consumption tax on everything, no income tax, no any other tax, no capital gains tax, no corporate taxes are the dumbest taxes in the world, because who pays the corporate taxes? Yes, corporate taxes are consumption tax, but they're hidden. So they're a stupid consumption tax because you can't keep track of it. Shareholders don't pay consumption tax, corporate taxes, right? Shareholders don't pay it because they buy the stock on an after-tax cash flow basis. So they know what the tax rate is. They don't pay the taxes. The only people who pay corporate taxes are the customers, of the people who buy the products. The tax flows directly to them. That's, by the way, who bears the cost of regulations? We do. Customers. And it might drive the business out of business. The business might lose money as a consequence. Anyway, flat tax. Tax on lobbying is an awful idea. Because lobbying per se is not a bad thing. So if you're Microsoft and you don't lobby, look what happens to you. You know how many dollars Microsoft spent on lobbying before the Justice Department went after them? Zero. Not a penny. And you know who went after them? Orrin Hatch, the senator from Utah, Republican, would, in the early 90s, would have hearings about the fact that Microsoft was not lobbying, and how dare they? Not lobbying. But how much money do they spend today on lobbying?
Millions.
Tens of millions a year. Does it make sense? Yes. I want them to lobby. It's the only way they'll survive. What you should tax, you can't do this, but what you should tax is politicians. They should put their money up. Every new regulation, you need a tax, you need to stop that. And of course, when you tax something, you get less of it. When you subsidize something, you get more of it. So if you tax politicians, you get fewer of it. Yeah, a couple of things. If you want the book, it's available on Kindle, audio book, and hardback copy on Amazon. It's the easiest place. But most Barnes & Noble stores have them. I've got a blog. It's capitalism.Ayn Rand, AYNRAND.org. That's my blog. I've got a Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. So there are plenty of opportunities if you want to follow and see what's going on. But the book is not an academic book. It's written for you guys. It's written for us, people interested in what's going on in the world today and how to fix it and how to address it. And it's very grounded. It's very this worldly. So I hope you all buy the book and enjoy it. And we need to keep fighting because this is going to be whoever wins this election. The most important thing for the Tea Parties is don't go away. Thank you for everything you did.